waiter walked in carrying a leather folder, and my entire world tilted on its axis. It was Thursday, one day, literally one day, before my wedding. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. That's where this story should start, I guess. But you need to understand who I was before that moment to understand how completely everything fell apart. My name is Ashley Mitchell. I'm 32 years old, and until that Thursday, I thought I had my life figured out. I'd worked my ass off for it. The kind of work that makes your friends stop calling because you're always at the office or grinding on side projects. My dad died when I was 23, sudden heart attack, no warning, and he left me his entire estate, $300,000. At the time, I was a broke paralegal making 38 grand a year, drowning in student loans, living with 2 roommates in a shitty apartment in downtown Denver. That inheritance changed everything. Not in the way you'd think. I didn't blow it on a Tesla or a down payment on a mansion. I was terrified of it, honestly. So I locked it away. Literally. I opened a high-yield savings account at a different bank, moved the money there, and never touched it. Not once in 9 years. I didn't even tell my mom about it. And that's the kind of secret that should have been my first red flag about keeping secrets in general. Instead, I poured everything into my career. I went back to school for an MBA at night while working full-time. I got my real estate license. By 30, I was managing a portfolio of 12 commercial properties for a development firm and making 6 figures. The inheritance just sat there, growing dust and interest, like some kind of financial security blanket I was too superstitious to touch. That's when I met Brandon. He came into the office on a Tuesday in March. He was meeting with our senior partner about a restaurant he wanted to open downtown. I was in the conference room pulling files, and I remember looking up and thinking, okay, he's tall. He had this easy smile, dark hair that fell across his forehead, and he was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He made eye contact with me for like half a second before turning his attention to the partners. But I felt it. I'm not usually that girl, the girl who gets butterflies from a look, but Brandon did something to me. He came back 3 weeks later to sign the lease. This time he asked for me by name. Apparently, he'd asked around the office about the woman with the dark hair who'd been in the conference room. My coworker Jennifer told him I was the serious one and definitely out of his league, which should have made me suspicious, but instead it made me feel like someone finally saw me. Not as the workaholic, not as the girl with the dead dad and the guilt complex, just as a woman someone wanted to know. Our first date was dinner at this little Italian place in Lodo. He ordered wine like he knew what he was doing. He asked me questions about myself. Real questions, not the surface-level stuff. He laughed at my jokes. He paid the bill without making it weird. By the end of the night, I was imagining our wedding. I know how that sounds. Desperate, pathetic. But you have to understand. I'd spent 9 years building a career. 9 years being the most reliable, competent version of myself. I had no best friends anymore, no hobbies beyond reading industry reports. And the last time I went on a date before Brandon, it was 2019. I was lonely in the way that successful women aren't supposed to admit they're lonely. Brandon filled that space perfectly. We moved in together after 4 months. He had a condo in Cherry Creek, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. He had great taste, good job as a restaurant consultant, seemed stable. His mom called every Sunday, which I thought was sweet. A sign of family values, you know? His friends seemed normal. We took a weekend trip to Moab. We hosted dinner parties. I brought him to my mom's house for Thanksgiving, and he charmed her completely. By month 7, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way I hadn't been since my dad died. I started planning the wedding. June wedding, outdoor venue in the foothills, 150 guests, the works. My mom got emotional looking at dress designs with me. I sent Brandon's mom, Karen, fabric swatches for the mother of the groom dress. She was particular about everything, but I didn't mind. I was going to be her daughter-in-law. I wanted her to feel included. Looking back, there were signs I missed. Little things. Brandon never wanted to talk about finances. When I mentioned my career trajectory, possibly moving into property development on my own in a few years, he got quiet. He'd ask me weird questions sometimes, like, if something happened to you, would your mom inherit everything? I laughed it off, assumed he was being morbid. His mom started calling more. At first, it was sweet wedding talk, but then it became about other things. She'd call and ask if Brandon and I had updated our wills. She wanted to know about my health insurance. She mentioned, casually, that Brandon had some debt issues in his 20s, but he was past all that now. When I asked Brandon about it, he got defensive and said his mom was exaggerating. She'd always been a worrier. I believed him. 2 weeks before the wedding, his mom called me directly. That was unusual. Karen and I had a polite relationship, but we didn't really talk unless Brandon was around. "Ashley, honey," she said, and I could hear something in her voice, something sharp underneath the sweetness. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I was in my car, sitting in the parking garage at work. I remember gripping the steering wheel. "Of course," I said. "What's wrong? Are you aware of Brandon's previous marriage?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "His marriage to Linda. They were married for 3 years. She left him in 2016. He doesn't talk about it because it was traumatic. But I wanted you to hear it from me first, as family." I couldn't breathe properly. "He's never mentioned being married before." "I know, sweetie. That's why I'm telling you. I think he should have been honest with you before proposing." We talked for 15 minutes. Karen was calm, methodical, presenting information like she'd rehearsed it. Brandon had been married. It ended badly. He'd apparently told his mom he never wanted to talk about it again and had asked her not to mention it to anyone he was dating. Karen said she'd respected that boundary, but felt it was wrong to let me marry him without knowing the truth. After we hung up, I sat there for 40 minutes. When I got home, Brandon was cooking dinner. He did that sometimes. He was a good cook, another thing I loved about him. He was making his famous risotto, the one he'd made for me on our third date. I didn't ease into it. I just said it. "Your mom called me. She told me you were married before." He went completely still. The wooden spoon stopped moving in the pan. I watched his jaw clench. "We need to talk about this," I said. He turned around. His face was a mask. "Karen had no right to tell you that." "Then you should have told me. Months ago. Before you proposed." He set down the spoon and rubbed his face with both hands. "It's not a big deal. It was a long time ago. I was a different person." "It's a big deal if you hid it from me." He turned back to the stove, stirring the risotto with more force than necessary. "I didn't want to talk about it because it was a painful time in my life. I didn't think it was relevant to us." "Brandon." I moved closer to him. "We're getting married in 2 weeks. Everything about you is relevant to me." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Linda was difficult. We got together young. We wanted different things. It didn't work out. I didn't see the point in dredging it all up with someone new." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. But something in his tone made me feel like I was missing part of the story. "I need to know," I said. "I need the actual story, not the summary." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were tired in a way I'd never seen before. "Not tonight, okay? I can't do this tonight. But I'll tell you everything this weekend, I promise." He didn't. The weekend came and went. When I brought it up Saturday morning, he said he needed to think about how to explain it in a way that made sense. Sunday, he said his mom had upset him by going behind his back, and he needed space. Monday, he got a call about a new client and had to fly to Boulder for a meeting. By Thursday, one day before our wedding, I still knew almost nothing. And that's when his mom showed up at my office with the lawyer. Karen walked into my office conference room like she owned the place, and the lawyer, a sharp-featured woman in a navy suit, set that leather folder down on the mahogany table with a deliberate click. I was wearing my wedding dress. Not the full thing, that was hanging in the back room, waiting for tomorrow, but the fitted lace top and the silk slip underneath. I'd been doing a final fitting with the seamstress in the back office when my assistant poked her head in and said, Ashley? There's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. I should have changed. That detail still bothers me. I met Karen in my wedding dress, half finished, pinned in 3 places, looking like a ghost of the bride I was supposed to become. Karen, I said, standing up, confused. What are you doing here? Is everything okay with Brandon? She didn't answer. The lawyer introduced herself as Patricia Reeves, family law attorney, and gestured for me to sit down. My hands were already shaking. I remember that clearly, the cold, specific terror of knowing something was about to break. Ms. Mitchell, Patricia said, opening the folder. I represent Brandon Castellano and his mother, Karen Castellano. I'm here to inform you of several facts regarding your pending marriage that you need to be aware of before tomorrow's ceremony. I couldn't speak. I just looked at them. Karen's face was calm, almost sympathetic. That was the worst part. She looked like she was doing me a favor. Brandon's first wife, Linda, Patricia continued, pulling out documents, filed for divorce in 2016 after discovering he had significant undisclosed debts. Approximately $180,000 in credit card debt, gambling losses, and loans taken against a business that failed. Linda was unaware of these debts when they married. The room tilted. Wait, what? He told me. He said it was just a bad relationship. It was a bad relationship because of the financial deception, Patricia said flatly. Linda also discovered that Brandon had taken out several joint credit cards in her name without her knowledge. When she left him, she was responsible for half the marital debt, despite not knowing it existed. I grabbed the edge of the table. He wouldn't. There's more, Karen said quietly. She actually sounded sad. After Linda left, Brandon dated a woman named Stephanie for about 18 months. He was engaged to her too. She ended things when she found out he had undisclosed debt again, another $70,000 he'd accumulated during their relationship. I don't understand what this has to do with me. Why are you telling me this? Why are you here? Patricia slid a document across the table. We're here because Brandon is currently in significant debt again, approximately $120,000. He's hidden it from you. When you marry him, you become legally responsible for his debts in the state of Colorado. Furthermore, we have concerns that your financial situation, your assets, may be a factor in his motivation to marry you. The words didn't make sense. They were English words, in English order, but the meaning was sliding away from me like water. That's insane, I whispered. You're saying that he's trying to… We're saying our son has a pattern, Karen said, and now I heard something under the sadness. Something hard. We're saying that we've already lost one daughter-in-law to his behavior. We've watched another woman get hurt, and we cannot watch it happen again. So we're telling you, before you make the biggest financial commitment of your life, what you're actually marrying into. I need to talk to Brandon. You should, Patricia said. But I'd recommend talking to a financial advisor first, and possibly a lawyer. She slid another document forward. This is a list of Brandon's known debts, creditors, and recent credit inquiries. He's been shopping for loans using your name. My name. I looked at that document, and something inside me broke like glass. You can't know for certain that he's doing it for money, I said, but my voice was hollow. I was defending him to his own mother, and we both knew it meant I believed her. No, Karen agreed, but I know that Linda believed in him too, and Stephanie. And I know that I have tried to help my son get therapy, deal with his issues, and change. But he hasn't. He keeps making the same choices, and I cannot let you be the third woman he destroys. I stood up. I needed them out. I needed oxygen. I needed to not be in this conference room in my half-finished wedding dress while my entire future collapsed in front of me. I need you to leave, I said. Patricia placed a business card on the table. Call me, at any time. even if it's 3 in the morning the day after the wedding. I've already prepared documents for an emergency filing if you need them. They left. Karen paused at the door and looked back at me, and I saw something in her face that I couldn't name. Regret, maybe. Or resignation. The seamstress came back 10 minutes later, asking if I was ready to continue the fitting. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman looking back. She was pale. She looked like she was going to be sick. I need to go home, I told her. I drove to the condo with my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The wedding dress, the incomplete wedding dress, was still partially pinned to my body. I couldn't make myself care enough to change. Brandon wasn't home. I called him 6 times. He didn't answer. I sat on the couch in our beautiful Cherry Creek condo with its exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, and I opened my laptop with shaking hands. I started searching. Brandon Castellano, debt, lawsuit, court records. It took me 20 minutes to find the first one. A credit card company had sued him in 2018. Default judgment. Then another in 2019. Then a personal loan from a bank he'd defaulted on. I kept searching. Court filings are public record. I found his divorce paperwork from Linda. I read through the dissolution agreement. I saw my own name mentioned. Brandon had apparently told Linda about me during their divorce proceedings. Had mentioned me as a future prospect, according to one of Linda's attorney's notes in the file. I sat there for hours. The sun moved across the room. The wedding dress slipped off one shoulder. At 7 p.m., Brandon came home. He stopped when he saw me. Something in my face told him everything. "Karen came to my office," I said. My voice was steady, which was worse than if I'd been screaming. "With a lawyer. She told me about Linda, about Stephanie, about your debts, about you using my name for credit inquiries." Brandon's face went completely white. "That's not—" "Ashley, it's not like that. My mom is trying to destroy us because she's—" "Did you use my name for credit?" He didn't answer. "Did you?" "I was going to pay it back," he said quietly. "I just needed a loan to cover some business costs. I was going to pay it all back before you even found out." I stood up. The wedding dress fell away from me, and I realized I'd been so desperate to get it off that I'd unpinned it myself at some point. "How much debt?" I asked. "It's not—" "How much?" "120,000. Maybe a little more now because of interest." I laughed. I actually laughed. It was the worst sound I've ever made. "And you were going to pay this back how? With what money?" "My business is about to take off. I've got investors interested in the restaurant concept. I just needed to bridge the gap. Using my credit." "Using our credit? We're getting married tomorrow." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I'd planned to spend the rest of my life with was standing in front of me, and I was looking at a stranger. Worse, I was looking at someone I'd chosen to trust with everything, and he'd been systematically betraying me since the day we met. "I want you to tell me the truth," I said. "The actual, complete truth. Did you know about my inheritance when you met me?" Brandon's silence was an answer. "Oh my God." "It wasn't like that," he said. "I mean, yes, I'd heard through some friends that you had money, but—" "You researched me." "I looked you up, yeah. But Ashley, I fell in love with you. That's real. Regardless of the money, what we have is—" "You have a pattern," I said. The words came from somewhere cold inside me. "You marry women with money. You hide debt. You destroy them. You've done it twice already, and I would have been the third." "I'm not that person anymore," he said. "I can change. I want to change." "You told me you didn't have a previous marriage. You lied. You told me you didn't have debt. You lied. You told me you loved me, and I don't know if that's true or just the most strategic lie of all." He reached for me. "Ashley, please, don't do this. Don't let my mom poison you against me." I stepped back. "Your mom just saved my life. That's what I'm going to remember about today." I walked into the bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the bed, our bed, and I called my mom. "Hi, honey," she answered. "Are you excited? Big day tomorrow?" I couldn't speak for a moment. "Mom," I said, "I need you to come get me, right now. And I need you to not ask any questions until we're in your car. My mother heard something in my voice that made her stop being cheerful. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While I waited, I opened my laptop. My hands had stopped shaking. Something had shifted inside me. I'd been devastated 5 minutes ago. Now I felt something else entirely: clarity and rage. I pulled up my financial accounts. I called my bank and froze my credit. I documented every single credit inquiry Brandon had made in my name. I screenshotted his text messages, his emails, everything. Then I did something that surprised even me. I opened a new document and I started typing out everything, every detail, every date, every lie. I wrote it all down like I was going to need it for something, like I was preparing. My phone rang. It was my mom, texting that she was downstairs. I grabbed a suitcase. I threw in clothes, my laptop, my documents. I left the wedding dress hanging on the bedroom door. As I walked past Brandon, who was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands, I said one thing: "Call your lawyer. You're going to need her." I didn't wait for a response. I walked out of that condo, down the elevator, into my mother's car, and I didn't look back. My mom pulled into the street, and the first thing she said was, "What happened?" "He's been lying about everything," I said. "And I think he did it on purpose. I think he targeted me specifically because of my money." "Oh, baby," my mom whispered. "I'm not a victim," I said. But I was. I absolutely was, and I knew it. But I'm not going to stay one. It was 8:47 p.m. on Thursday night. My wedding was in approximately 17 hours, and I was about to do something that would change everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my mom's guest room, my laptop open, my phone on silent, and I built a case against Brandon Castellano like I was preparing for trial. Because that's what I realized at 2 in the morning. This wasn't just a personal betrayal anymore. This was fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and potentially conspiracy. I had documentation, I had evidence, and I had something Brandon didn't expect from me: a spine. By 6 a.m., I'd created a folder on my encrypted drive with everything: screenshots of credit inquiries made in my name, the court documents from his previous divorces, bank statements showing his repeated pattern of debt accumulation, text messages where he made promises he never kept. I even had the document Patricia Reeves had left with me, the list of his creditors. Then I did something that surprised even my mom. I called a lawyer, not Patricia, someone else, someone who specialized in fraud and family law both. Her name was Jennifer Wu, and I found her through a legal referral service at 6:47 a.m. I left a voicemail explaining the situation in clinical terms, asking for an emergency consultation. She called me back at 7:30 a.m. "I can see you at 8:30, Jennifer said. Her voice was crisp, professional, and most importantly, it didn't carry a shred of judgment. "Bring everything you have? And, Miss Mitchell, don't contact your fiancé. Don't communicate with him in any way. Everything you say can and will be used against you in a civil suit. And right now, we need to establish a clear timeline of when you became aware of his fraudulent activity." The wedding was supposed to start at 4 o'clock that afternoon. At 8:15 a.m., I walked into Jennifer Wu's office in downtown Denver, carrying a USB drive with every piece of evidence I'd compiled. My mom waited in the lobby. I'd asked her to come, but I made her promise not to try to comfort me. I needed to stay cold. I needed to stay focused. Jennifer was exactly what I needed: a woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Walk me through everything," she said, and I did. I told her about Brandon meeting me at the office, about the quick engagement, about how his mother had appeared with Patricia's folder, about the credit inquiries made in my name, about his admission of $120,000 in debt. She took notes in a leather notebook, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions. "You have the credit inquiries showing your name?" she asked. "Yes. Dates, times, amounts, everything." "And he admitted to this in writing or verbally?" "Both. Verbally at the condo, but I documented the conversation in my notes immediately after." She nodded, making another note. What about the business loans or credit cards he opened? I have the creditor information. Patricia Reeves gave me that list, and I've been pulling my own credit report. I found 3 accounts I never opened, 2 credit cards, and a personal line of credit. Perfect. That's identity theft. That's federal. Jennifer set down her pen and looked at me directly. Here's what you need to understand. You're not getting married today. You're not getting married tomorrow. And you need to file a police report before you do anything else. I know. I don't think you do, she said gently, because filing a police report means admitting to the world that you were stupid enough to marry a man who defrauded you. It means telling everyone at your wedding why there's no wedding. It means, potentially, having to testify against your fiancé in court. I swallowed. I'm aware. But here's what you also need to understand. She leaned back in her chair. If you don't file that report, if you try to handle this privately, he keeps doing this. He moves on to the next woman. He's already demonstrated a pattern with at least 2 previous victims. You have the opportunity to stop him, to put his behavior on record, to make it harder for him to do this again. Linda and Stephanie, I said quietly. Exactly. He targeted them. He'll target someone else if we don't stop him. You're not just protecting yourself, Ashley. You're protecting the next woman. My mom was crying in the lobby when I came out. I wasn't. I felt like I'd turned into something made of glass and steel. I hugged her anyway. I need to go home and change, I said. Then I'm going to the police station. Sweetheart, don't you want to? No, I don't want to rest. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I want to file a report. I want to get this on record. And then I want to watch him realize what he's done. The police station on East 13th Avenue was crowded. I waited for an hour before an officer named Detective Marcus Chen came out to meet with me. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of tired eyes that come from seeing too much of human nature's worst side. I laid it all out for him. The credit inquiries, accounts opened in my name, the pattern with his previous wives, the conversation where he admitted everything. Jennifer Wu had prepared a summary document, and I handed that to him along with copies of all my evidence. This is solid, he said after reviewing it. The identity theft alone is enough to open a case. The pattern with the previous spouses strengthens the fraud angle. Has he threatened you? Not directly. Has he tried to contact you since you left? I checked my phone. 43 missed calls, 37 text messages. I turned the screen toward Detective Chen. He read through a few of them, his expression hardening. Please come home. We can work through this. My mom lied to you. He set the phone down. Classic manipulation. This is documented. Good. I'm going to file a report. We'll open an investigation into the fraud, and I'll recommend we look into whether this qualifies as organized fraud, given the pattern with the other women. What happens now? I asked. Now we interview him. We gather more evidence. We likely refer this to the DA for possible criminal charges. In the meantime, you need to file a civil restraining order if you feel unsafe. I don't feel unsafe, I said. I feel angry. Detective Chen smiled. A small, tired smile. That's good. Anger is useful. But get the restraining order anyway. It establishes a legal boundary. It took another 2 hours to complete the police report. By the time I left the station, it was almost 3 o'clock. My wedding was supposed to start in an hour. I called the venue. I asked to speak to the events coordinator. My hands were shaking slightly as I made the call, but my voice was steady. Hi, this is Ashley Mitchell. I have a wedding scheduled for today at 4 o'clock. I need to cancel it immediately. There was a pause. Oh no. Is everything okay? Is someone hurt? The groom committed identity theft and fraud, I said, and it felt surreal to say it out loud. The wedding is off. I understand there will be fees. Please send me an invoice. Okay. I'm so sorry. Let me get you connected with our manager. While I waited, I texted everyone I could think of. My mom, my best friend from college, Sarah, who I'd drifted away from because of work, but who'd agreed to be a bridesmaid, my coworkers, my boss. The message was short. The wedding is canceled. Brandon committed fraud and identity theft. I've filed a police report. I'll explain everything when I'm ready. Thank you for understanding. Then I did something that felt almost ceremonial. I blocked Brandon's number. I blocked his email. I blocked him on every social media platform we shared. And I called Patricia Reeves. "It's Ashley," I said when she answered. "I want to know if you can help me. I want to know if Linda and Stephanie would be willing to come forward. I've filed a police report. I've documented everything. And I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." There was a long silence on the other end. "You're serious," Patricia said. "I'm completely serious." "Give me 48 hours," she said. "I think they will be. I know Linda has been waiting for an opportunity like this for years." Over the next week, things moved quickly. Detective Chen interviewed Brandon. He lawyered up immediately, called some criminal defense attorney who probably cost him money he didn't have, which was grimly satisfying. The DA's office reviewed the case and decided to press charges for identity theft and fraud. The amount was significant enough to make it a felony, but the civil side moved faster. Jennifer Wu filed for emergency financial protection orders. She subpoenaed Brandon's financial records. She requested his phone records. And she started building a case that he'd systematically targeted women with assets for the specific purpose of accumulating debt in their names. That's when things got interesting. Detective Chen called me on day 9. "We found something," he said. "In his phone records and his bank statements. There's a pattern. He's been communicating with someone. We're trying to figure out who, but there are regular payments being made to someone with the initials KC." My stomach dropped. "Karen Castellano." "His mother?" "Yes, but that doesn't make sense. She's the one who warned me. She came to my office and—" I stopped. The realization hit me like a physical blow. "Oh my God!" "What?" Detective Chen's voice sharpened. "She tested me," I whispered. "She came to my office to see if I would leave him. She was checking if I was going to be another victim, or if I was going to fight back." I'm not following. "I think Karen has been helping her son do this on purpose, not to stop him, to facilitate it. She warns the women as a test. If they leave, they're smart. If they don't, they become targets. She gets a cut." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. That's actually brilliant in the worst possible way," Detective Chen said finally. "And also potentially criminal. We're going to need to look at Karen's finances too. And we're going to need a statement from you about her involvement." I gave a formal statement 2 days later. And that's when the dominoes really started falling. Linda came forward. Then Stephanie. Both of them had stories that made mine look like the opening chapter of a much darker book. Linda had spent 3 years paying off debt she didn't accumulate. Stephanie had dealt with collections agencies calling her at work. Both of them had been manipulated when they tried to leave. But here's the thing. Both of them had also consulted with lawyers. Both of them had documentation. And both of them had been waiting for proof that Brandon was doing this to other women. "We were afraid it was just us," Linda told me on the phone. She sounded older than I expected, worn down by years. "We thought maybe we were crazy. Maybe we'd made bad choices. But then, when you came forward—" "He did it to me too," I said. "But I got out before the wedding. You didn't have that chance." "No," she said quietly. "But I had the chance to help stop him from doing it again." The case went to trial 6 months later. By that point, Brandon had been charged with 3 counts of identity theft, 2 counts of fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy. Karen had been charged as an accomplice in 2 of the fraud cases. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 4 hours. So did Linda and Stephanie. We sat in that courtroom and told our stories while Brandon sat at the defense table with his attorney, his face blank. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Brandon got 5 years in federal prison. Karen got 2 years and would be released in 14 months with probation. She'd cooperated with the prosecution at the last minute, which earned her a reduced sentence. When the verdict was announced, I felt something I didn't expect, Nothing. Not relief, not triumph, just a kind of exhausted finality. Justice, I learned, doesn't feel like closure. It just feels like the end of something that never should have begun. After the trial, I took a leave of absence from work. I went to therapy, real therapy, with a woman named Dr. Patricia Morrison, who specialized in financial trauma and trust issues. I learned that my years of working obsessively weren't just about ambition, they were about control. I learned that my isolation had made me vulnerable. I learned that I'd chosen Brandon because he was the first person to make me feel chosen in a very long time. I also learned that none of that was my fault. 6 months after the trial, I got a call from Linda. She'd started a nonprofit called Second Chances that helped women escape financial abuse. She asked if I'd be interested in joining the board. I said yes. A year after the trial, I went back to work. I was promoted to VP of Development. I bought a house, not in Cherry Creek, but in a quieter neighborhood, with a garden I could actually tend. I made new friends. I went on a date with a man named David, who worked at a bookstore and had absolutely no ambition to be anything other than happy, which turned out to be the most attractive quality I'd ever encountered. 2 years after the trial, I used part of my inheritance, the part I'd been too afraid to touch, to fund a legal defense program for women who'd been victimized by financial predators. I called it the Mitchell Foundation, after my dad. He would have liked that. The inheritance that I'd been terrified of using, that I'd hidden away for 9 years, became the thing that helped other women protect themselves. Brandon was released after serving 4 years of his 5-year sentence due to good behavior in prison. As far as I know, he's working at a restaurant supply company in Arizona. Karen lives with her sister in a different state. I don't think about them much anymore. But I think about that moment on Thursday, one day before my wedding, when I sat in my mom's car and realized that the worst thing that could happen to me had already happened, and I was still breathing. I was still whole, and I was going to be fine. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't destroy you. It just shows you who you really are when everything else falls away. I turned out to be someone who fights back.